And welcome back for another video on creating games with Construct 2. So I did a couple of videos last night on using arrays. So basically the introduction to arrays, for loops, and then iterating through each element of an array. I followed that up with a video on inputting data, reading it from a text file, and then taking that data and putting it into an array. So I'm going to take it one step further and kind of continue that example for creating the basics of a trivia game. So we're going to store our questions and answers in a text file. We're going to read them in, we're going to put them into an array, and then we're going to display question and answer, and then kind of randomly go through and choose different series of questions and answers. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch back over to my Construct 2 project, and I've created a couple of things here that are pretty simple. I've got this is a text box called question. It's just a text box. It's pretty simple. Then I've got answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, and answer 4. So as you can expect, the question will display the question for our trivia, and then the answer choices, each one of those text boxes will hold an answer choice as well. So in our event sheet, and one more thing, I've already added the functions object, so I'm going to take advantage of using some functions here to kind of clean up my logic, something you're probably familiar with at this point, but if not, you'll catch on pretty quickly. So in the event sheet, on the start of layout, I want to call my load questions function. I haven't added the logic here, so that's what we're going to do. And then we're also going to add the logic for a function called getRandomQuestion. So we want to load in all of our questions into our array, and then once we have them all, we want to display a random one. So we're going to get all of our questions from this questions.txt file. There's nothing in here now, so I'm going to fill it in. And what I'm going to do is, if you watch the previous video on reading in data from a text file, you need to separate your data. You need to have some way to be able to separate your question from your answer, answer 1 from answer 2, and so on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate each series of questions with this straight up and down bar, and then each individual item in that question set will be separated by a semicolon. So it'll look like this if we do question 1, colon, and then this will be answer 1, 1, answer 1, 2, answer 1, 3. I've got a typo up there, but that's okay. Answer 1, 4. And then the last thing I'm going to put in this question set is the actual correct answer. So the correct answer will just match exactly one of those previous answers. So I'm going to choose answer 1-2. And then now that ends our first question set. So now I can put this pipe here, and that means that we're separating to another question. So if I did question 2, I would do answer to 1, answer to 2, and so on. This will take me a second to fill this in. 2, 4, and then I'm going to say my correct answer is 2, 4 as well. So 2, 4, there we go, and then pipe that out. So that means we have our second question set. So let me save this, and let's go in, and when we load the questions, we want to actually use the Ajax object. So that's what we used in the previous video. So let me add this Ajax object. An Ajax object allows us to go out and request files, whether they're on a server, whether they're local, regardless of where they are. So the first thing we do in this load questions function is actually use the Ajax object to go out and request the project file. And that project file, as you'd probably expect, is the questions.txt. And we're going to call this load questions, and we'll see why we match this tag in a second. So Ajax object doesn't really know how long it's going to take to go out and make this request. So instead of just continuing logic here, we're going to add an event handler for onCompleted. And then we need to match the tag here. So this is saying this event is triggered when the Ajax object is finished getting the string from the text file, or from whatever file we're reading from, right? So inside of this load questions complete, that's where we need to take the string that we got, to parse it, and to put it in an array. So for right now, I'm going to add a for loop. Again, this is something that I did in a previous video. So I'm going to add system and then for. And right now we only have 2 questions, so I'm going to say for each question set, and then go from 0 to 1, because again we only have 2 questions right now. So 0 to 1, and if we notice, our questions array has 10 slots, we can change this to 2 to make it match, but whatever we want to do. And with this for loop, we need to also add a local variable that's going to keep track of which iteration we're on. So I is going to start at 0, and then we need to manually system add 2. We need to manually increment I by 1 each time so that it corresponds to which iteration we're on. So now when we in this for loop, in this iteration, we want to parse that string and take everything. Let's pull back up that text file. Everything before the first bar, that's going to go in bucket 0. That's going to be our 0th index. Everything past that, question 2, will be our first index. So we could have made this match a little better, but remember, arrays are 0 indexing. So you start at 0, 1, 2, and so on. So let's say we use our token at. So let's go to questions array. Let's set at x. The x value is going to be our I variable, and in the value we're going to use the token at function. This is something we talked about again in the last video. But we need 3 things: the text that we want to look at, the index of the, basically which question set we want, 0, 1, 2, 3, and which separator we're using to separate the question sets. So the text we're going to use is the ajax.lastData. The index is going to be I. And the separator, again, our question sets are separated by the bar, the straight up and down bar. So I'm going to drag this up here. And now let's actually debug this and see if we did this right. So let's debug. And we haven't displayed anything yet, but if we go in and look at our questions array, we should see we have our question 1, answer 1, 1, answer 1, 2, and so on. So we've got it loaded correctly. Now we need to go in and select a random question from there to display to these text properties in the browser. So that's going to be our next piece. And after we finish loading the questions, let's just go ahead and automatically call the get random question function so that we automatically get a question displayed when we're finished. So let's add a sub event here, and we'll do a function and call, we just need to add a blank sub event, and then we will do function call function, and we'll call the get random question. So now we need to fill in the logic here for this random question. So what we want to do is display, let's open back up our text file. We want to parse whatever question set we get. So let's say we get question set 2. We want to parse the question separate from the answers and then save this answer choice so we know what it is. So I'm going to add a global variable that's called current answer. It's going to be a text, and its initial value is empty. So now when we get our random question, we want to, let's add a local variable here. Actually, I guess we can just add a global variable. It's not going to let us add a local one there. Let's add a global variable for random number. And we want to get a random number, so we want to assign that random number, system set value. We want to set random to a random number between 0 and 1, not 0.1, but 0, 1. And we need to round that number, because that's actually going to give us a decimal. We need to round that to an integer because we just want 0, 1. So we'll do done there. Now that we have our random number, we can go in and get the index of our array at that random number, that item, and then parse it. So for instance, we'll start with the question text, and we're going to set its text to the questions array dot at, and we're going to get the item at the random with our random variable. And again, that will return us either this first question set or the second question set. So then when we get that, we need to parse this to get out these individual properties. So now we're going to use the separator as a semicolon, and for the question, get the 0th index. So we'll go in here and say token at, and that question's at random will be our text. We want the 0th, actually we want the we want the 0th index, and then we want it to be separated by the semicolon. It's a lot of stuff, but hopefully that makes sense. Did I, give me 1 second here. So I got my variable typed in wrong here, so it should be random number. So we'll do done here. So then we're basically going to do, and I'm going to go in and copy this. So we're basically going to do the same thing for the answer choices, but we're going to change the index that we want in that string. So we'll set answer 1, we'll set text. I'm going to paste in that same thing, and I'm going to just change this index to 1. Then we'll go in for answer 2 and set text, paste it in, change this to 2. For answer 3, we'll do the same exact thing, set text, paste it in, and say we want the 3rd index. And for answer 4, we'll set text, paste it in, and take the 4th index. Now, one last thing we need to do is keep track of what our current answer is. So we're going to do a system set value, and we're going to set current answer to that same thing that we just did, except now we want the 5th index, right? Whew, all right, that's a lot of work. Hopefully that makes sense. Once you kind of break it down, if you take it piece by piece, a little easier to understand. So let's just run this layout, and hopefully we'll see what we expect. Okay, so we got question 2 to start off with. If we update it, there's question 2 again. Now there's question 1. So now we're getting the random question set, right? Question 2. All right, so that's working as we would expect. Cool. So that's a lot of the basics for doing a trivia game. The next thing we can add, and I'll do this fairly quickly, is just when we click on one of these answer choices, we just want to check to see if it's correct or not. So if let's add another text object here, a text called feedback, and we'll just put it right in the middle. I'll make this a lot bigger, make it pretty big. And it doesn't have to be pretty, so I'll just leave it right there. But now, and I'm going to add one more thing, the touch object. So when we touch on one of those answer choices, there we go. When we touch on one of those, we want to check to see if it's correct. So let's add a touch event for each one of those text objects. So on touch object, and then we'll choose answer 1, and I'll do this kind of fast. Touch, on touch object, answer 2. Touch. There's our 3rd one, and then we need our 4th one as well. I know I'm moving fast. This is pretty straightforward. I just want to get this out of the way. Answer 4. So if we touch answer 1, we want to then compare the text inside of answer 1 to see if it equals the variable that we have here for current answer. It's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to actually add a function here that says to on function, I'm going to call it check answer. And when I call this, I'm going to call function check answer, and I'm going to add a parameter being the answer1 dot text. So I'm going to take the text property of the thing that we clicked on, and then call the check answer. So let me copy this, and actually I'm just going to copy this one down 4 times. Now when we check answer, let's add a sub event. So sub event where we do a system compare 2 values. Or actually, we can compare variable, and we can check to see if current answer equals the parameter that we received. So function.param 0, because it's the first parameter. If so, feedback text set text to correct, and then if we add an else here, add else, we'll copy down this feedback text and set it to incorrect. There we go. And then finally, I want to add another blank sub event here, and when we're done with all of that, let's just recall to get function and call function and get random question. So we'll check to see if the answer is correct. If it is, set the text to correct. And actually, when we start this layout, I'm going to make this text property be invisible. So invisible, and when I check to see the answer, I'm going to set it visible. Set it visible, and then after we get done here, I'm going to wait for 1 second before we call the new question so we can actually see our feedback. So let's run this again, and let's see, for question 1, the correct answer is 1, 2, and for question 2, it's 2, 4. So let's go back to here. So question 2, I said the answer is 2, 4, and it says incorrect. So that is not right, and then I'm supposed to set this back to visible. So let's go back 1 second. So let me change this back to invisible. And so one thing I forgot to do here was to pass in the correct parameter. So instead of answer 1 text for all of these, we're going to answer 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's run this one last time. And I said question 1, the answer was going to be 1, 2. So there's correct. This should be 2, 4. And if I choose any of these to be, actually they're all saying correct now, which is not the case. So let's take a look at that one more time. And in my testing, I had commented out this set text incorrect. So one more time, this should all work properly. So 2, 4 I think is the answer. Question 1, 3 should be wrong. 2, 3 should be wrong. 1, 2 should be right, and so on and so on. So you can scale this out pretty easily by changing the amount of question sets that you have in here. It's much easier to just type a set of questions and answers into a text file versus inputting them directly into an array. So regardless of how many questions we have in that text file, as long as we change the size of the array to accommodate, and as long as we change this end index, we can iterate through and input as many questions as we want. So these are the basics of doing a trivia game, but again, you can scale it to any amount of questions that you want. And this is basically the same template that I've used in my personal project. So this is pretty much what I use when I do something on my own. So I hope this was helpful. Again, a lot of good stuff here. If you're looking to do a trivia game, this will really help you get started. So I hope this helps, and thank you guys for watching. Welcome back, everybody, for another video on creating games with Construct 2. So last night I spent a little while recording a couple videos on, the first one was using arrays. So just an introduction to what an array is, how to put stuff in an array, how you get stuff out in an array, stuff like that, and then using for loops to kind of help put stuff in there and then help iterate through each of the different elements. In the second video, I took it a step further to input data into an array from a text file using the Ajax object. So if you need a refresher on any of those things, I would go back and check out those other videos, because I'll cover some of that stuff in this one. But basically what we're going to talk about now is taking all of that stuff that we've kind of learned in the last couple of videos to apply it towards doing the basics of a trivia game with Construct 2. So we're going to store our questions and answers in a text file. We're going to read them in using the Ajax object. We're going to then store them in an array, and then we need to be able to manipulate and read from that array to get our data to display to the user. So typical contact information on here. As always, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, concerns, please comment below or find me on Twitter at JamesQQuick. But I'm just going to jump over here to an existing project that I set up, and it's actually pretty simple. It doesn't have much going on. We've got a question text object, which obviously for the trivia game will display the question that we have for the user. And then we've got answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, answer 4. Those are going to be our 4 answer choices if you think about a multiple choice exam. And lastly, I have a feedback text here. This is something I use just to kind of as a debugging thing, so I'll pop up some messages here. to display. It's going to start out as invisible, and then every time we answer a question, we're going to display here whether or not the user gets the answer correct. So let's go over to the event sheet, and I've just got a couple of global variables here. One is random number, so this is where we're going to store a random number that we create. That'll let us get a random question out of our array. And then we have a current answer variable. So when we click on either one of these answer choices, we just want to compare the text inside of that text object to the correct answer. If they match, obviously the user got the answer correct. Then I've got several functions here, so I'm using the function object. Again, got a video on functions, so if you need a refresher, go check that out as well. But basically what we're going to do here, and it looks like we've got a lot, but it's pretty simple. On the start of the layout, I want to call this load questions. This load questions will be where we actually go out and request the data from our text file. Pretty straightforward. From there, we're going to get a random question, and to do that, we're setting our random number variable to a random number between 0 and 1, and we'll see why in a second. Here's our touch events for the different answer choices, and they're going to call the check answer function, which sets that feedback text to visible and then checks to see again if the text of that answer choice that we clicked on matches the current answer. You get correct. If not, you get incorrect. We want to wait a second, call get random question, so that'll get the next question, and then we'll set that feedback text back to invisible. So we'll see. Again, it seems like there's a lot going on, but it should make sense as we get going. So the first thing we want to do is take a look at this questions.txt file. So what we're doing here is we're basically going to separate not only a question set. So a question set has a question, 4 answer choices, and then the correct answer. So for instance, this would be question set 1, this would be question set 2. These are going to be separated by this pipe, and then each individual item in a question set is separated by a semicolon. So you could do this in any format you want. This is just what I've come up with that makes it pretty easy to me. It's what I've used in all of my personal projects and all of my tutorials and stuff. So this is what I'm going to use. And so right now we just have 2 question sets. So I'm going to save this and close it. And notice that our questions array only has a width of 2. So each one of those, actually let's open back up the text file. Each one of these questions set will go into its own bucket, as you can call it, in the array. So let's start in this load questions function. Let's use our Ajax object. And again, go back to one of the previous videos if you want to learn a little bit more about it. But let's request a project file. And the tag we're going to do, I'll say load questions. And then we want to request the questions.txt file. So Ajax doesn't really know how long it's going to take to go out there and get those things. So instead of just continuing logic here, we actually need to add an event handler. So Ajax on completed, that will be triggered when they finish getting the data from the file that we requested. And so here we have to match the tag, and I think it was load questions. So once we call the load questions function, it goes out there and requests the questions.txt file with this tag load questions, and then when it's finished, when it's completed, it triggers this event down here. So this is where we need to actually take that data and put it into our array. So I'm going to add a for loop here, and we talked about this in one of the previous videos as well. So I'm going to add a sub event and do a system for. And this for loop will basically say for each question set, and we'll start at 0, we'll go to 1, and this would change if we had more than 2 answers. So go to 0 to 1, and then for this for loop I need to add a local variable I just to keep track of which iteration that we're on. So for each iteration I'm going to do a system add 2. I'm going to add 1 to I each iteration so that I is incremented with the iteration that we're on. So it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, but for here it'll just be 0 and 1. So what I need to do is go into our questions array and do a set at x, and we're going to set at the ith index, so that I variable, we're going to set at that index the value of the question set inside of here. So we're going to use the token at expression or function, and we talked about this in the last video. We're going to use the text of ajax.lastData. So this is the last thing that Ajax retrieved. Then we're going to use the ith index separated by the pipe symbol. So again, in this text file, it's going to go in and grab everything that's separated by this pipe. So it'll be question set 1 and question set 2, and they will go into the 0th and 1st index into our array. Let me drag that up before we increment. So we have our load questions. Let's just debug this really quickly just to make sure that it's acting the way that we want. So we'll go into our questions array, and here we see question 1, answer 1, 1, answer. So that all looks good. Now let's go out, and when we get done with this, let's add a blank sub event. Let's call, so function call function. Let's call the get random question function, and in the get random question function, that's where we're going to go and get a random question set from the array and then set its individual pieces to the text boxes that we need. So now that we've got our random number set here, we can go into question, for example. We can set its text, and we can set its text to, and what we want to do is we want to go into the array, so questions array dot at and dot at random number. So this will get us a question set. Now we need to go in and get the question part of the question set. So we can use this token at expression again, using that whole question set as the text. Then we want to get the 0th index separated by semicolons, because the individual pieces within the question set are separated by semicolons. So that one should be okay. Now we'll do, let's make this a little bigger. Now we'll do the same thing for answer 1, set text, and actually I need to copy this part, so let me copy this, open up the answer 1, set text, and then just change this index to 1. And we're going to do that for answer 2, answer 3, and answer 4. So let me do this really quickly. Change this index to number 2, answer 3, set text. And I'm moving really fast. You should have seen it from the first part, what I'm doing, from doing the question part. So answer 4, set text, paste that in, and this will be the 4th index. Now the last part, we need to keep track of what the current answer is. So I'm going to go into system and set value, and we're going to set current answer to paste in that same logic and just change this to the 5th index. So what we've done is each time we want to get a random question, we get a random number between 0 and 1, and that 1 would change depending on how many questions we have. Then we want to set each piece of that question set to the appropriate text object. So the question text gets the 0th index. Answer 1 is 1, answer 2, and so on. So let's run this again, and we should see there's question 2. If we refresh, there's 1, 1, 2, and these are all random, so they're going to go back and forth, right? So that's working as we expect. Now let's pop down just a little bit. So again, I told you we have our touch events for answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, answer 4. They're going to call the check answer function and pass in the text of that text object. So answer 1.text, answer 2, and so on. So when we check this, we want to set that feedback text to visible. Again, that's this text here. Then we want to compare the current answer global variable. Remember, we set that every time we get a new question, and check to see if that equals the parameter that came in to the check answer function. If it does, set the text to correct, else set the text to incorrect. Then we'll wait 1 second, we'll call to get another random question, and then we'll set the feedback text to invisible. So let's run this one last time, and we'll see that question 1, I believe the answer I have here should be 1, 2, so that's correct, and then this should be 2, 4. So now anything else, 2, 3, should be incorrect. 2, 2 should be incorrect. 1, 1 should be incorrect. 1, 2 should be correct, right? So that's working as we'd expect. So lots of really good stuff here, building on the videos we had with arrays and then using the AJAX object to read text from data. Now we're just kind of putting all those pieces together to build the basics of a trivia game. And this is basically how I lay out all of the trivia game templates, tutorials, and then the personal projects that I've worked on. This is the basis for what I do there. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment below. If you find me on Twitter at JamesQQuick, you can message me there as well. And thanks, guys, for sticking around.